to the Thought Snob Podcast. I'm Paula Swope. Let's get snobby. If you're sick of censoring your every move because you're afraid of offending someone, this episode is for you. I'm going to give you the lowdown on why getting offended shouldn't be so popular and so accepted. People with high emotional intelligence just don't get offended that easily, and high emotional intelligence is way more attractive than someone who's always complaining about getting offended. So my inspiration for this episode came from a couple of different places, and the first place was a post on Instagram. I saw this the other day, and it said people who don't get offended easily are more intelligent. Now, I don't know if that's literally true, and the science on intelligence and offense sensitivity is not rock solid one way or the other. But here's what research does show. People with high emotional intelligence, that's the ability to understand and regulate emotions and ourselves and others. Those types of people tend to manage stress better, have higher well-being, and handle conflict with more clarity and less reactivity. So if someone doesn't get offended easily, it's not necessarily about IQ. It's about emotional self-regulation, awareness, and choice. And those things absolutely contribute to better outcomes in life and relationships. Now, my own hypothesis, it's definitely more true than false. People who don't get offended easily are emotionally intelligent. That's all there is to it. And emotional intelligence, unlike IQ, is something you can work on. I used to get offended all the time. My ego would flare up over the stupidest stuff. I'd take things personally. I'd react. I'd defend. I'd want to be right. And every time, I sacrificed my peace. Now, I also know people, maybe you know them too, who truly believe they're supposed to get offended. They not only take offense, they escalate it. They debate others. They try to change other people's minds. And here's the real payoff of that. You never sway anyone to your way of thinking, but you destroy your peace trying. When you have the chance to be right or peaceful, choose peaceful always. Choosing peace is self-care. Now, there's a lot to be said about people who are just cool, like people who don't get offended over every little thing. They don't let someone else's feelings or beliefs dictate their mood. They don't shove their beliefs down your throat. They're cool. Now, here was my second inspiration for this episode, and this is a recent example of this. So something blew up online from a scene from Landman, and if you haven't watched that show, that it's a TV series that's gaining lots of attention, and the main character's daughter, her name is Ansley Norris. So in this episode, Ansley is at cheer camp and gets paired with a difficult roommate who identifies as non-binary. Some people were outraged and offended by how the scene played out, like lots of social media commentary. But here's the thing. Offense is a choice of interpretation. You can choose to be offended by someone's pronouns or beliefs, or you can simply notice you're not compatible with them and move on. If I had been in that situation, I wouldn't have wanted to be roomies with that hateful person either. Pronouns wouldn't have been the issue. Now, however, the next episode, I think it was the grand finale, demonstrated a different, more compassionate side to the non-binary character. They showed Ansley compassion, and she responded with kindness, and it changed the dynamics of their relationship. So it should never be about pronouns or color or social status or politics or any label. It should always be about how someone treats you. That's the judgment right there. That's the only judgment you should make. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I don't fully understand every aspect of pronouns myself. And honestly, I don't care if someone wants to call themselves whatever they want to call themselves. We can't expect everyone to agree with us on everything, and we certainly shouldn't expect everyone to love who we love or think what we think. What makes this world so interesting and fun is we're all different. I mean, imagine how boring the world would be if we were all the same. So instead of letting someone else's preferences destroy your mood, be aware of who you are and who you aren't compatible with, and stay away from the energy that doesn't serve you. And here's something really important. You don't have to watch anything that triggers you. If the news, for instance, offends you, don't watch it. There are very few things in life you have to do, and consuming outrage and nonsense is not one of them. So here's what I want you to ask yourself. Why should I care how someone feels about music or politics or art or whatever the case may be? Why should that matter enough to affect my peace? And here's the deal. Feeling good should be your number one priority. Have you ever felt good when you were offended? I know I haven't. I used to have a pretty bad temper. I use that temper to my advantage in this day and time, but I used to have a pretty bad temper. I didn't have any control over it. So getting offended made me so mad that I couldn't focus on anything else but the person who had offended me, and that mess could last for days or weeks or years, and I accomplished nothing. Think about stand-up comedians. Stand-up comedians are trained to offend people because it creates shock value. It gets a reaction, but none of it has any real impact on your life. So why get offended? Why allow yourself to be offended? You give that other person complete control over your emotional state when you allow yourself to be offended. So why even bother with it? I absolutely refuse to allow anyone, especially someone I'm not compatible with or I don't like, to control how I feel. Hell no. I'm not doing that. I'm done with that. When you choose to be offended, you let your ego take control, and your ego cannot tell the difference between a real threat and something trivial or something imagined. And, here's another mindset shift that saved me in my early years of step parenting. Whenever I felt offended or upset, I started asking myself, will this matter in 5 years? That question alone diffuses so much unnecessary emotion. It puts you in check. Be present. Think before you react. And let me shoot you straight here. People who get offended easily are generally not well liked. They're rarely popular. I mean, that's usually the case. In contrast with people, who are cool, calm, charismatic, and compassionate, and who don't get offended at every turn, they have a huge advantage over people who are opposite from them. And all this is your choice. Offense is not something that just happens to you. Offense is a decision you make about how you interpret what someone else says or does. And you don't You don't have to make that choice. Just think to yourself, well, they think differently than me. They aren't wrong or right. They're just different. But do I like them or not? Associate with people you like, and to hell with the rest. And that's the message from today's episode of the Thought Snob Podcast. And I really appreciate you being here for it. And I will see you next week.
The Thought Snob Podcast with Paula Swope has been brought to you by Thought Snob Media in association with Special Purpose Studios. All production, mixing, and sound engineering by me, Will Swope. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please take a few seconds to give us 5 stars and leave a review. See you on the next Thought Snob Podcast with Paula Swope.